when the decorating crew was in here Wednesday preparing us for this season. We made the decision to put the Christmas tree up on the chancel because we now have the pulpit down where the tree has normally been. And once we got it in place, I thought, oh, it looks really nice, but I'm going to feel like Mrs. Doubtfire sitting in front of the fire as I offer a few words. So with that in mind, please pray with me. May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God presence in me. And may these words that you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the God presence in you. Amen. A young mom arrived at the front doors of church one Sunday morning and turned to her 5- and 7-year-olds, crouched down in front of them, looked them in the eye, and said, "Now remember, you must be quiet in church." Well, the 5-year-old seemed a bit puzzled and asked, "Why do we have to be quiet, Mummy?" And before she could respond, the 7-year-old turned to his sister and very matter-of-factly said, "We have to be quiet because people are sleeping." Aside from the surface humor of this, I believe there is a deeper, much deeper truth. Not just about our engagement with worship from one Sunday to another, but our engagement with life in general. We spend a lot of our waking time asleep. Asleep to the wonder and the mystery of this life, the very presence of God. The season of Advent has traditionally been a season of expectant waiting, preparing once again for the coming of the Spirit of God into our lives and into our world. I suppose that is a good thing if it does keep us awake during the waiting. But I'm not sure that is what Isaiah or Mark or Jesus really had in mind. Rather, I think that the message of separation from God that was so clear in both those passages needs to be understood in a very different way. The God presence is not, never has been, and never will be separate from us. The Spirit of God is within each and every one of us and present in every single encounter with another and with all of creation. If we are feeling separate from the God presence, it is because we are not open to it. We are asleep. I know this not just because I witness it, but also because I am guilty of being asleep myself. I'm not saying anything I don't already know about. I can so easily get absorbed in the planning and the doing that I separate myself, usually unintentionally, from the presence of God in each moment. And the irony is that I know perfectly well that it is when I open to that Spirit in the moment, to the awe and the mystery of life, that I become more alive, more fully human. I'm sure many of you felt that in the moment shared this morning. Jan Phillips, one of the presenters in our Painting the Stars study, is an author and a visionary leader, and she said in our last session, through 13.7 billion years of evolutionary moments since creation began, this moment is the most important one. For this is the moment of experience and presence, where we encounter wonder and awe. An example that, as I thought of that comes to mind for me is a moment I experience every year as we decorate the Christmas tree. I have a fairly ratty looking old ornament that has a picture of my grandmother on one side and my grandfather on the other. It was made by my cousin for each of the grandchildren the year that my grandparents passed away in 1995. Every year since, as I unwrap that ornament from its tissue and hold their images before my eyes, I feel their presence with me. And I open to the God presence at the very heart of life. And in that moment, it is a moment of love. It is a moment of sadness. It is a moment of joy for all that they were. And it is a moment of awe. Life is deepened by becoming aware of the infinite wonder in all creation, aware of the incredible mystery of life itself, aware of the presence of God in every single moment. It is being willing to be awed over and over and over again. Kirk J. Schneider, a psychologist, a professor, and a self-described humanist. And I always think it's interesting with these humanists because so often they are so in touch with the mystery that we call God. Even they choose another word for it. He says this in his book, Awakening to Awe. Awe is the sense of amazement, humility, and wonder before the mystery of life. Ultimately, we know not from whence we came, nor whither we are headed, and this evokes awe. Awe is not just a cheap thrill or a stunned helplessness. It is an appreciation of the whole of life, the fragile as well as the exalting. Awe inspires us to see through the pettiness of life and connects us to the cosmic adventure, the great adventure. And this adventure has remarkable potential to lift us, to heal us, and to give our lives meaning, especially in our awe-starved world. And he goes on to say this: how do we attain a sense of awe? The answer is through presence to life in its fullness. Anything that evokes or points us to the vastness and mystery of existence can inspire us to experience awe. This includes a great loss, but also a great achievement, a great trauma, but also a great love. It can also include a sunset, a work of art, a rainstorm, or a baby. Anything that shakes us out of the everyday and reminds us of the bigger picture of life and creation. Becoming aware and embracing awe requires us to turn Isaiah's lament, "Oh, that you would render the heavens and come down," and to turn Mark's warning, "Know that the promised one is near, so stay awake," to turn those into moments of awe and wonder. It is for us to see that God is right here in the wonder and the mystery of life, in every breath. All we need to do is stop and be still and open to the moment. As Jan Phillips said, the most important moment that is right now. For that is where we will encounter the Spirit of God. We are being allured by the God presence to open our eyes and open our minds and open our hearts to life itself. Sometimes the moment will seem profound, That is certainly how I experience the moments with that Christmas ornament. And sometimes they appear to be much simpler, but no less important. I shared with some of you earlier this week my experience of opening to awe in a moment following that snowstorm of Tuesday night. I woke up to a cold house Wednesday because the power had been off for several hours. And then I looked outside to see a good 8 inches of wet snow that needed to be shoveled. I have to admit that awe and mystery were not part of that experience. Rather, I was anxious about the lack of power and annoyed that there was so much snow to shovel. With those things on my mind, I dressed and I took the dog for his morning walk. I hadn't gone more than 12 steps before I found myself suddenly in the moment. Benny, our dog, was bounding happily and excitedly through the deep snow, leaping and diving and leaping and biting at the snow and diving again. Becoming aware of Benny's encounter with the morning opened me to the wonder and the humor of the moment. I shoveled differently that morning. And in the midst of the shoveling, the power came back on. Realizing how much more life is than just living. Thanks be to the Spirit that is God. Now, as we move through Advent towards the celebration of Christmas, I wonder how we might become more aware of the Spirit in our midst. There is plenty in the story of Jesus' birth to point us toward the mystery of life. This great, wonderful, mythical story. Mythical because it was not written as historical fact, and was never intended to be understood that way. Rather, mythical because it is a much bigger story when we see the universal truths at the heart. The story of Jesus' birth is the recognition of the presence of God in all of life, every morsel of it. It is the presence of God in the birth of a child, something that we've all experienced. It is the presence of God in the love of a mother. It is the presence of God in the curiosity of shepherd strangers. It is the presence of God in the interconnectedness of the entire cosmos that is proclaimed by angels. This is the presence of God that Isaiah yearned for, that Mark pointed towards, that Luke imagined in story, and that we are awed by. We need to stop waiting for God to be born, for Christ to begin. Rather, we need to open our eyes and our minds and our hearts to the God presence that is already here, already born. And be Christ in our lives and in our world. All it takes is to not be asleep and become aware.